Threat?
Director.
Director, thanks. Director, good morning and welcome to Lincoln Ware Live. I'm guest host, attorney Lisa K. Crawford, and we have a great show lined up for you this morning. We will be talking with Marvin Blade during the first half of the show. He is the Community Relations Manager from Duke Energy. And we also will speak with Andrew Glenn. He is the city's Public Services Director. And we'll find out from Duke Energy if they've met all their goals to restore power in the area and what they had to do to rapidly address the needs of so many people without power following the windstorm 2 Sundays ago, September 14th. And we'll also talk with the city's representative about what to do about downed trees, and you know, there's a lot of limbs and debris all over the place, and so we'll talk about that. And during the second half of the show, we'll talk with the executive director of the Coalition for the Homeless, that's Georgine Getty, as well as the executive director of the Drop-In Center, Pat Clifford. And we'll have a showdown between those two groups, City Councilman Bortz and the directors of those agencies, over a city resolution to stop the unchecked proliferation of social service agencies in Over the Rhine. So those two groups will be in during the second half, and we'll find out if the city has, if these service agencies has made good on their threat to sue the city in federal court over the issue. But first, we want to turn our attention to Duke Energy representative and the city's representative about the power outage and the restoration. Welcome, Marvin Blade.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, and thank you, Andrew Glenn. I appreciate you both for being here this morning. First of all, Mr. Blade from Duke Energy, tell us what happened on following September 14th. What was Duke Energy's mission at that point?
Certainly. On September 14th, as you will realize, we had a terrible, unprecedented windstorm that came through this area, which was the remnants of Ike. And as a result of that, we have 800-some thousand customers in the greater Cincinnati area, which includes northern Kentucky. 90% of those customers experienced outages as a result of that. So obviously for the last 2 weeks or so, our role has been restoring power and getting our system back up so we can serve customers as we do every day.
And you know, you heard things from people in certain communities, like one neighborhood, there would be power, and then the very next neighborhood, you go across the street and there's no power. How did that happen?
And that's a good question, because we get that all the time. Our distribution system is set up on circuits, and a circuit will have X number of customers on it. Some have hundreds, some have thousands. If a tree has fallen on a circuit, we actually could have one neighborhood that has power and the other half of it, or right across the street, doesn't. Okay. So just based on the damage that was done, that's how that happens.
Okay, so different circuits cause that problem.
Exactly.
And then, you know, there was this big thing about, you know, how to prioritize who to get to first. How did you all make that decision?
Good question. Our priorities are primarily to get the most customers on first. Okay. So the circuits that are the longest, the circuits that have the most customers, those would be targeted first. We also have another priority system where hospitals and critical care units are also prioritized first. And then secondly, we also had public schools that were also prioritized.
And that certainly makes sense. And then, everybody has power now, or are we fully restored?
We are fully restored. It actually took about 10 days to get all of those 700-some thousand customers back on, but we are fully restored. Our initial hopes was to, with the storm occurring on Sunday, was to have 100% restoration by the following Sunday. Okay. However, it did take a few days longer than that to get everyone restored.
So altogether, from September 14th, about 10 days total to get everybody restored.
Right.
And you're aware that the longer it took for people, the more frustrated they became.
Definitely. And you know, we certainly, even my own house was out, and we were out until Thursday. So yeah, certainly, it is very frustrating. We tried to communicate, and I don't know if you're aware that Duke Energy did give a grant to the Free Store Food Bank and to people working cooperatively and the Hamilton County Community Action Agency to help those that are disabled and those that are low income with support for storm damage.
Okay.
Many times a meter box may have been pulled from a home, and if you're an elderly customer, that's hard to repair that yourself before Duke Energy crews can come out.
So you did help certain people with funding?
With funding,
okay.
right. And that was a $150,000 grant that went to those agencies combined with funding, and some was for ice and other things, because we realize it is terribly uncomfortable and very disruptive in our lives these days.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We're going to turn our attention now to Andrew Glenn. He is the Public Services Director for the City of Cincinnati. And the issue, Mr. Glenn, that a lot of people have following that windstorm were the downed trees and the limbs. And I mean, there was so much debris all over the place. What was the city's role in responding to that?
Our first role is that we started with the main fare-throughs, getting the streets open as much as possible. Then we followed the Duke crews where the lines were not in the trees. So that is our policy is, once there's a downed line, have trees in it, we do not touch the tree. Then the following week, we came back and followed through a process of using our normal trash crews to go through the city and pick up all the debris we possibly can within a certain time. Some of the issues that the trees were so large and so forth, we had to put together all of our forces together. We use MSD, Parks and Recs, and we use Waterworks. We had a total of 200 some staff members and 70 pieces of equipment, and we were all prepared to move forward.
Okay, well, I tell you, and it seemed like things worked like clockwork for some people. Obviously, there was some frustration about some of the issues, and we'll talk more about what type of problems, if any, the city encountered in trying to deal with that task of tree and debris removal. We're going to take a quick break. I'm Attorney Lisa K. Crawford, sitting in for Mr. Lincoln Ware. This is WBQC-TV. We'll be taking a break. Oh, boy. I messed up my English there, but anyway, you guys got me. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. Lincoln Ware Live. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Lincoln Ware Live. I'm guest host, attorney Lisa K. Crawford. And during the first half of the show, we're talking with Marvin Blade. He's the community relations manager for Duke Energy. And also we're speaking with Andrew Glenn, and he is the city's public services director. And if you have questions or comments for these gentlemen about the power outage and some of the issues that follow that, feel free to give us a call this morning at area code 513-651-3838, or you can dial 381-3838. Gentlemen, we do have some calls on, and so we'll go right to the phone lines. Good morning, Ms. Coleman. Welcome to Lincoln Ware Live. How are you?
I'm blessed.
Good.
I would like to thank you and the two gentlemen that are sitting there. I am 65 years of age, and I have emphysema. I had to go to my daughter's house because mine was out. But I just want to thank Duke Energy, period, and the men that are sitting there. Praise God for you all's help and for our electricity.
How long was your power out?
Mine wasn't out too long. It went out Sunday, and it came back on Sunday evening.
Okay. Well, very good. And it seems that Duke Energy is getting a lot of praise these days, and, you know, rightfully so. I mean, no one knew exactly how quick the response time would be, how they could get it organized so quickly. But overall, I think most people, most citizens and customers of theirs in greater Cincinnati area are pretty pleased. And thank you for also expressing that this morning.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You have a blessed day, all three of you.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. All right. Is this Deborah? Good morning and welcome to Lincoln Ware Live.
Yes, good morning to y'all.
Good morning. Go right ahead with your question or comment.
Yes, I'd just like to say thank you also. No one knows what's going to happen.
That's
and then,
true.
there's the signs, the different seasons, I'm trying to say, I'm trying to, be an aspiring pastor. And what happens, I'm going to tell you how good God is, okay? Like you said, like the gentleman said, the Duke Energy, the hospitals and everything is on. Right here, transformer right here, have a lot of interception problems, but didn't have that day. And man, we was all, it was about 5 floors in this apartment building. But see how good God is, you start praising Him.
And Deborah, some people, in just talking with people, I've heard some people say, people came out of their homes and their apartments. They started speaking with their neighbors, checking on their neighbors. I mean, did you find that things like that were happening around you, where people were coming together in a time of need?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's a common story that people are sharing, that people actually began talking with each other and checking on one another, and that was certainly a good thing that came out of that situation as well. Well, thank you.
And we need more of it, not just in the bad times. We need to have we just need a mustard seed. Just take a mustard seed of faith. Amen. Keep on believing. Keep on praying. Amen.
Thank you. Amen. All right. Okay, that's just trying to take us to church this morning. But Duke Energy, it seems like rightfully so, you're getting a lot of praise.
I think we do have a lot of folks that have been very appreciative, and we're appreciative of that. Obviously, not everyone feels that way, but the men and women that worked this storm, they were working 12 and 16-hour shifts. And you think about that impact, their homes were without power as well. So we are very appreciative to those that worked. We had more than 350 work in our call center, 1,200 1,200 employees that were on crews that were Duke Energy employees. Okay. But we had about another 1,200 that came from out of state to work in this area during the storm. So again, tremendous effort on their part.
And who gets all the credit for organizing that at Duke Energy? Because that had to be a massive organizational effort.
It is, and it's a number of individuals. We do have storm preparedness sessions and meetings, so where we prepare for disasters of this sort. Now, this was still unprecedented. We've never had this many customers out all at one time. The greatest outage we've had was about half of our customers, and that was in February of last year during the ice storm. But you look at these numbers, and 90%, this was pretty unprecedented for us, but all that preparedness and training did help.
Okay, and people, I mean, there's nothing people could really do, but just as a matter of speaking, what can people generally do to prepare for things like this? Is there anything that Duke Energy wants to put out there to the public in terms of how to prepare for disasters that may impact them like this?
Obviously, for a power outage, there's things you can do, such as having flashlights on hand. Some have generators, but I do want to say, even if you have a generator, that you need to be careful, because there are safety issues with generators if they're not hooked up correctly. So just generally being prepared. Having candles, and there's safety issues around candles as well. True. But having candles, flashlights, and having a good plan. Our customer call center number is 421-9500, and I did want to encourage customers that if you have an outage, to please call into that number. Many customers will think that we know about all outages that occur, and we don't necessarily. There could be one block out and the rest everyone else is on. So.
Okay, and we're going to also have some follow-up with Andrew Glenn of the city's Public Services Director. Let's take another call here quickly. Paul, good morning. Welcome to Lincoln Ware Live. Are you there, Paul? All right, I'm going to put Paul.
Good morning.
Oh, good morning, Paul. Go right ahead with your question or comment.
Yes, ma'am. How you doing?
Good, thank you.
Oh, great. Hey,
go right ahead.
I'm kind of disturbed that why don't we have prevention besides reacting? I mean, I was coming in town a couple of days prior to getting here, and my parents are 70 years old, and then they was out till Saturday.
Yeah, I mean.
And then, I mean, if you come down here in the spring and fall and cut the trees down over the wires, it won't have that problem.
Okay, now you're talking about trees.
I got 9 trees in my yard, Mel.
All right,
So that's what knocked the power out of it.
So your problem was with the trees, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Mr. Glenn, what about that? He says, you know, if there was more preventative things done before the storm, it wouldn't have been as bad for him.
Correct.
What's the city's responsibility with regard to issues on private property? Any?
We don't have any responsibility for private trees. In a normal hurricane such as this, you're always going to have trees from private property fall into the right-of-way. City's responsibility, once it gets into the right-of-way, our responsibility is to remove the tree, disrupt traffic so it doesn't disrupt traffic and so forth. Just on this storm alone, we've collected some 20,000 tons of debris in 12 days.
That's a lot. That's a lot. So if the right-of-way, meaning that if your tree falls into the public path, right-of-way, street, walkway, then the city will respond. But if it's on private property, it's the owner's responsibility.
The homeowner's responsibility.
Do you understand that, Paul?
Yes, I understand. But guess what? Why don't we try prevention first? If you know the weather is going to be bad and it's coming, why not get the people out here prior to the weather getting here, and then we'll have a more...
Well, I mean, I kind of hear where you're going, Paul, but, you know, that's, you know, I'm a lawyer, and it's just...
I'm in Corrine Township.
It's almost like saying, like, go arrest someone before a crime is committed. You can't really do anything until the damage is done, unfortunately. That's what it kind of is boiling down to.
Yes, ma'am.
You agree with me?
Yes, ma'am, I understand.
Trees are very critical to the global warming. They
Right.
help with keeping your house cool and so forth. People do plant trees in order to shade their homes for the summertime.
Correct.
And as a natural part of what we do is to have trees in our environment so we have a clean air.
Yeah, we want trees,
Okay.
but obviously, I mean, your point, I think I sort of understand, but it's probably hard to monitor it that way.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
then disasters don't always give a forewarning either. I mean, who would? Go ahead.
Also, with the forewarning for disasters that you just mentioned, if you recall back to September the 14th, the news forecast for that day was breezy weather,
Right.
strong winds, breezy weather, but nothing of this magnitude.
Right. It's the first of its kind.
It's a first of its kind.
No one really knew.
Exactly. And Duke Energy does have a line clearing program where we trim around lines. We do that every 4 years on distribution circuits.
What about on demand, if a customer calls and demands it?
Normally not on demand, normally, unless it's a safety issue.
Okay.
If there is a tree that's in a line and it's burning, but normally once every 4 years
You
we
guys
will
do
come do a circuit. But our crews did tell us that many of the trees that fell were beyond the right-of-way.
Okay.
So they wouldn't have been trimmed anyway. They it happens to be a 150-foot tree that's right out of the right-of-way, but if it falls over, it takes the line down.
All right, we got to wrap up here, but I'm going to try to get Myra in. Good morning, Myra. You have a quick question for our guests?
Yes.
Go right
Good morning.
ahead. Good morning.
My question is something that happens at this great a magnitude. Well, we know that it's forces from the Most High, but my concern is that the city of Cincinnati, well, I feel, not only Cincinnati, but everywhere, we need to be letting the people know that they need to have like an emergency, like an emergency setback, emergency kit.
A kit,
and that's for everything, the food and everything, because there was a lot of people where I live at, seniors. I went out and helped a few seniors that they didn't. I mean, all their food was spoiled, so it needs to be, a plan that where they know what to put back and certain things. So if anything of this great magnitude happens again, that
people will be ready. Yeah, thank you, Myra, for your call. I really appreciate that. We do have to wrap up, but you made a great point. And now that we know, it's a good time to help those senior citizens be prepared, those of us in the communities that can go out and check on them for the next emergency. All right, Mr. Glenn, if people want to reach you about tree removal, debris removal, how can they contact you or the city?
They can call our customer care center. That's 591-6000. That's 591-6000. 6,000.
All right, thank you so much, Andrew Glenn and Marvin Blade. Once again, if people have concerns or issues regarding the power outage, where can they contact Duke Energy?
That number is 421-9500.
421-9500. Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your valuable time this morning with our viewing audience. All right, we're going to take a quick break. I'm attorney Lisa K. Crawford. This is Lincoln Ware Live, WBQC-TV, Channel 38. We'll take a quick break and come back with the second half of our show. Stay tuned. And welcome back to Lincoln Ware Live. I'm guest host, attorney Lisa K. Crawford. In the second half of the show, we're talking with City Council member Chris Bortz, and we're also talking with the executive director of the Coalition for the Homeless, as well as the executive director of the Drop-In Center. And what we're dealing with here is a City Council resolution that basically wants to stop the unchecked proliferation of social service agencies in Over the Rhine. If I didn't get it right, I'm sure Chris Bortz will straighten me out. But there's an issue here, and there's been a lawsuit filed over this issue. And so, again, the executive director for the Coalition of the Homeless, Georgine Getty, is here. Thank you. And we also have the executive director of Drop-In Center, Pat Clifford. And obviously, they're against this city resolution. And then we have Chris Bortz that's here to defend the city's resolution. Hi. All right. Hi. Thank you all for being here today. Good morning. I appreciate you all being here. Why don't we start with Chris Bortz? Their city council passed a resolution to do what with regard to this issue?
See, I think the first thing is to understand what a resolution is, really.
Okay.
So you've got three different ways that council changes the law. There's an ordinance, which is a pretty hardcore statement, and
right.
that once an ordinance is established, you violate it, you're breaking the law.
It's akin to a law.
It's a law.
It's a law. Yeah.
And then there's a motion, which is a pretty forceful statement of policy and generally directs the city administration to do something very specific to accomplish a goal. Then there's a resolution, and resolution is sort of the most gentle of all of the ways that council interacts. They're by definition non-binding, and generally they're utilized as a way of sort of focusing attention on an issue and beginning a conversation on an issue.
Okay.
So what this resolution did is it said, well, wait a minute now. We've got an awful lot of social service agencies in one neighborhood.
Over the Rhine.
And over the Rhine.
How many?
Over 100. So let's see is that going to have a negative impact or not? And if it does, what can we do about it? So the resolution doesn't say let's eliminate anything. It doesn't say let's move anybody out. It's just the beginning of a conversation.
And it says, the resolution basically says, and if you want to paraphrase it, it says what?
It basically says there's a lot of social service agencies in this community. That may have the potential to negatively impact the community.
In what ways?
In potentially lots of ways. Now, if you've got one area where all the social service agencies in the region are concentrated for the most part in that one location.
Okay.
That suggests that the people who need service only live there, but they don't. They live all over the region. Are we doing a disservice to Over the Rhine by saying that anyone that needs service has to come here for it? Mm-hmm. Or is there a better way of doing it? Is there a way of saying over time we want to help distribute more evenly those social service agencies across the region?
All right, and when did that resolution pass, Chris?
This is a couple of months ago now. I actually did a little research. I can't find where any lawsuit was filed against a resolution of government at any level. So it's very unusual to take an aggressive stance. Now, the history of this is important too. The city of Cincinnati lost a lawsuit with CityLink.
Right.
And CityLink wanted to locate in the West End.
And some people say the city is basically retaliating with this effort now because they lost that lawsuit against CityLink, and now you're trying to find a way to come back and do what you couldn't do in that lawsuit.
I think that's a pretty cynical way of looking at it. The city, in reaction to the lawsuit by CityLink, has a requirement now to change the zoning code. We were told by the court in the CityLink case that we had no definition of social service agencies that held up muster in court, so we have to go back and look at it. So the Planning Commission had started the conversation as a result of the lawsuit Council engaged the conversation through the resolution, and additional committees were established to start to research, well, what can we do, if anything, to explore how we can more evenly distribute social service agencies around the community so they can be located in more than just one neighborhood.
Okay, well, let me check in with the other side over here because we have a different point of view. Let me start with Georgine Getty. You're the Executive Director for the Coalition for the Homeless. What's your perspective about this city's resolution?
I have a few points on that. The one is that the timeline just doesn't make sense. CityLink won their lawsuit in February of 2008, and then a small group of residents started meeting to look at these zoning codes, look at these definitions that Councilmember Bortz alluded to. And then on May 15th, that's when these groups really form, these community groups, to start looking at definitions and what are we comfortable with and what does it mean to be concentrated and what does, what kind of negative impact, if any, is there. So that all started in May. The resolution didn't pass until June 25th. So one of my concerns is we've all worked very hard this summer on subcommittees to kind of like hash this out as a community and to come to some sort of consensus. And I'm afraid that this resolution kind of comes on top of it and says, well, no, whatever you come up with, we're still going to assume that Over the Rhine is impacted and negatively impacted and that it's concentrated. Another issue is that the resolution, to say, oh, it's just a harmless resolution, that's one thing, but we all know that words do matter. And there's some fairly hostile language in the resolution, things like unchecked proliferation. Unchecked proliferation is a phrase that's usually used for cancer or terrorist cells or something horrible, not something positive for the neighborhood.
Like the drop-in center.
Right. And we see Human Services as doing a great service to our neighbors and helping people out and helping them to achieve self-sufficiency. So just the language itself was really problematic, but also the resolution directs the city manager to do whatever he can to stop this concentration and stop this impaction.
So there is a call for action then.
There's absolutely a call for action.
So that's why you say it's not a harmless resolution.
It's
if
not.
The city is directing the city manager to take action to try to, in your opinion, do what?
It's to try and get agencies out of Over the Rhine, which is really confusing because nobody has been able to define what concentrated is, what impacted is, how many agencies does it take before someplace is concentrated. And I have issues with the 100 number too. Nobody has ever been able to come up with a concrete number of how many agencies are operating in Over the Rhine.
Well, let me ask the Executive Director for the Drop-In Center, Pat Clifford, do you think that 100 or so service agencies in Over the Rhine is too many?
I think that the number is wrong. It doesn't jive. I've been at Drop-In Center for 18 years, and I see an increasing demand for services. I don't see a lot of extra services out there for people who need help. On the opposite, I see people who need the help but cannot access services, cannot get into drug treatment, cannot get into daycares, cannot get into anything. If anything, the number of services has gone down in this city. And from my perspective, here we are in a time of great economic crisis, foreclosures, the banking system is having a turmoil. This is all going to increase to more poverty, more homelessness. And instead of trying to point the finger of blame, we should be trying to come together, work together, and say, how can we do things better?
But what about what Councilman Bortz said as far as this negative impact? Does it, to have all of these services concentrated over the Rhine, does it imply that there are no other communities in the city that need services?
No, and I would think if you would look at the city of Cincinnati, most neighborhoods have social services in them. And quite a few neighborhoods would also consider themselves to have quite a few social services in them. But social services are there to help. And what I disagree with, that there's a causal link between social services and crime and Over the Rhine. And one thing I'd like to bring up is that the Drop-In Center, we've seen our demand for services go up 20% in the last year due to the economy and other factors. However, crime has gone down in Over the Rhine. There's been a 5.1% decrease in Part 2 crimes in Over the Rhine over the past year, even more than that over the past 2 years. There's been a 14.5% decrease in calls for services in Over the Rhine when homelessness has increased 20%. And so I could see you coming to me and saying, well, homelessness has increased 20% and crime has increased 20%, so obviously there's a causal link. But I see it the opposite, where we are providing more services, but crime is going down.
And so, yeah, well, that is obviously a good thing. All right, well, we have two sides that we have to balance out here. When we come back, we're going to take a quick break right now, but when we come back, we're going to check in with Council Member Bortz again and get his response on this. I understand there's been a lawsuit filed, and we want to talk about that. And so we want to talk with you, too. This is Lincoln Ware Live, WKRP-TV. And welcome back to Lincoln Ware Live. I'm guest host, Attorney Lisa K. Crawford, and we are talking with Council Member Chris Bortz, as well as Georgine Getty, the Executive Director for the Coalition for the Homeless, and also the Executive Director of the Drop-In Center, Pat Clifford. So we have these two sides that are here representing different points of view on this issue of proliferation of social service agencies and over the Rhine. Councilmember Bortz helped sponsor a resolution that basically says there's too many and there needs to be some kind of checks and balances on this process. Do you want to elaborate?
Sure. And that's a good way of characterizing it. The really unchecked proliferation is an actual fact. There has been no, in effect, and we learned just from the CityLink case, absolutely no direction in the city zoning code as to where social service agencies locate, and if they're permitted to continue to locate in one community indefinitely, or whether there's a point at which we say that's enough for this neighborhood. And Over the Rhine is a great case study. You know, years ago, the federal housing policies concentrated supported housing in Over the Rhine. Mm-hmm. So you had an enormous concentration of federal housing across America that concentrated very closely within urban centers. As we went to a traveling voucher program, Section 8 voucher program, we saw Over the Rhine empty very quickly, and the neighborhood had become, in effect, a concentrated area of extreme poverty. It had become a concentrated area of crime, and I think Pat mentioned, I'm not sure that there necessarily is a causal relationship, but study of city after city after city shows that there is, in effect, a causal relationship between the concentration of poverty and the incidence of crime.
I want to ask a question right here real quick, and we do have calls lining up, and if you care to join us, the phone number is 651-3838, or you can dial 381-3838. You know, are you really just trying to protect the business interests in the city? And is that who's really behind this? Is there some type of lobbyist group that's out there saying that all these social service agencies bring the value of properties down in the city and we need to get rid of them so that we can keep our values of our businesses and properties?
You know, of course not. This is, remember, virtually all of council supported this resolution. Except one.
Which was?
Cecil Thomas. The reality here, and he, of course, has a lot of support for CityLink and has made that clear. The reality here is we have to do better. We are not doing a good job by the people of the city of Cincinnati. We are not doing a good job by the people in Over the Rhine. We need to take a look at our model. And every time we try to address this, I mean, it's like the third rail of Cincinnati politics. Don't touch social services. Don't discuss social services. If you do, you're a bigot, or you don't like poor people, or you're defending business interests. But the reality is, very good people came to the table and all said the same thing. From the United Way, the Greater Cincinnati Foundation, the Free Store Food Bank, the Talbert House, they're all saying similar things.
Which is, there's too many social service agencies?
Which is, there's no plan. There's no strategy. There's no way for us to understand our impact. There's no way for us to communicate effectively and collaborate effectively because there's no leadership behind it.
Okay, you guys feel free to jump in if you want to, but there's another issue that Georgine Getty brought up, Councilmember Bortz, and that is that this resolution is not quite as harmless as you make it out to be, especially since it directs the city manager to do something affirmative towards trying to, in her perspective, limit the number of social service agencies. What's your response to that?
Well, the city manager doesn't change the law. So it directs the city manager to look at the problem and come back with resolutions and solutions and suggestions. Council has to act to change an ordinance, to change the zoning code. it can't just be done in a vacuum by the city manager. He doesn't have that authority. Right. So a direction of the manager to act is a direction of the manager to investigate and research the problem. And people who've been around city government for a long time generally know that.
All right. Why is, you want to respond to that?
Well, I mean, it's frustrating to me, I mean, just as an agency director, someone who feels responsible when someone comes to our doorstep, someone's in need. I mean, I feel responsible for trying to help people in crisis. We've done a lot to improve. We've added a whole new intake system at the drop-in center. We have 9 case managers now working to change people's lives. We have an on-site drug and alcohol treatment program. So we've done a lot to try to meet the need, and I feel very responsible for it. But what I am frustrated by is we're very clear on where we can't be, and we're very clear on legislating where we cannot be, which is where our home is now. But there's no leadership to say, well, where are we going to go? Where can we go? I mean, I don't see any neighborhood, Hyde Park or Martin Lookout saying, please come to our neighborhood.
Right.
No.
Nobody
so
wants
leadership is both ways.
Right.
I mean, you could say, it's very easy to say, don't go here. We want to stop you from being here. But it's harder to say, I want to welcome you. No.
Because no one else will have them? Is that the conclusion?
What I think is the best type of system is where you cannot even distinguish what a social service is from what is not. We should be designing our social services so that a subsidized house has no distinction from a non-subsidized house. A shelter has no distinction from a group home or hospital. We should be able to be working towards that, but that takes resources.
Right.
And that takes leadership. And I think what we have is the start of, I mean, and maybe this could change. You know, hopefully this is the starting of a new dialogue. But it's like we always have, from my perspective, we always have the front part of where you cannot be. Right. We don't have the follow-up of where we can go.
Well, I got a quick question for Mr. Clifford.
Though, they're actually in the zoning code right now because of the CityLink case. Social service agencies can locate in any district, anywhere in the city, any zoning code.
Did you know that?
Well, it's zoning-wise, but it's political will. I mean, we can be anywhere, but is a drop-in center going to open in Mount Lookout? Probably not in our lifetime.
Now, the thing is that when you see
that's the type of thing.
you see people in lines outside, soup kitchens, going, for shelter, things like that, doesn't that send a signal of low-income properties and devaluation of properties? Do you think that that is something that this resolution aims to limit?
Well, I think I hear it clear. Like I said, I feel responsible for not only helping people come to our doorstep, but also for hearing community concerns. I know people do not like to see people are homeless. They do not like to, when they're driving from point A to point B, it makes people uncomfortable. I realize that.
Do you think that's behind this resolution?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I mean, people do not want to, it makes people uncomfortable. People do not want to see it. Now, I say, look, maybe there are ways we could change. We work together to say, how can we have places where people can go during the day so they do not have to be outside? Maybe, day labor, which a lot of our people take advantage of to get it's kind of a dead-end temporary job, but they spend time waiting on the sidewalk. How could we link the two together to get people into more productive lives?
All right, is the homeless shelters, the homeless coalition, is it needed? Absolutely. Is it something we can do away with in the city and over the Rhine, you think?
That's my whole point. When you really start to look at it, people are homeless for 2 reasons. They're homeless because they don't have access to affordable housing and they don't have jobs that pay a living wage. That's why people suffer. That's why people go to soup kitchens. That's why they can end up homeless. And the way I look at it is, it's the job of the leadership of this city to make sure that the citizens have housing and that they have employment. And it is the job of human services to make sure that when they don't, then we can fill that gap and get people back on their feet. Social Service Network is a vast network of professional people whose business is helping people. And they're not just located in Over the Rhine, they're located all over the city. And in increasingly hard times, I think probably all of your viewers know somebody who has had to use services, a family member have used them themselves. And that's what we're looking at. So I'm not sure how a dialogue is supposed to start when the first we learn of this resolution is when it felt like a slap in the face. Just like, there's too many of you and you're ruining the neighborhood. And I would also add, I don't think a new agency has gone into Over the Rhine in probably over 20 years. So the agencies that are there are there because that's where they were originally. And it's not to say that they'll never leave, but like Pat said, they have to be given options, they have to be given resources, and the community has to not be told the message that their neighborhood will be ruined if we come in.
That's great.
So let's get a response from you. What do you say to that?
That's fantastic. This resolution, and any change to the zoning code by definition would be forward-looking. So this wouldn't be removing any existing agency.
Okay, does that make you feel better over here? That it's not about removing existing agencies? That's the word from the Councilmember Bortz. It's about what will come in the future. That's what you're saying, right?
Absolutely, because that's the law. You can't go zone somebody out of existence. That would be a constitutional taking. But more to the point here, this resolution doesn't impact homeless services. Shelters and emergency shelter grants and emergency shelters and transitional housing are treated differently in the zoning code. This didn't exactly address directly the zoning code as it relates to emergency shelters. But let's talk about the drop-in center for a second. All of us, every single person in this city, should be absolutely ashamed of the state of our emergency shelters in the city. We should be ashamed.
I very strongly disagree with that. I very strongly
Have you ever been there?
disagree with that.
Well, let me hear why. I don't know why he's saying that. Why are you saying that?
Is an insult.
I've seen
Talk about an insult. I mean, he's insulting me right now.
I'm insulting
he's
all of
insulting
us.
the drop-in center.
I think we all take responsibility for this. This is a center that has
Why
been
do
unchanged
you say that?
for 30
Because obviously, you know, I would think that a lot of people are offended who are in need, and especially, like you said, the executive director.
Oh, this isn't about saying to the folks who need the drop-in center that we're ashamed of them. This is about saying we need to do better by them, way better. There's no excuse for the lack of resources that have been brought to the table to improve the quality of the shelter, to improve the case management of the shelter. In fact, we didn't really start looking at it until Pat finally had an opportunity to engage in a discussion with Cincinnati Public Schools to get $500,000 to sell a transitional piece in order to create more dollars for case management.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Let's get
I mean,
a response
I've
from
worked
Pat.
at the drop-in center for 18 years. I've dedicated my life to helping the homeless. I'm very proud to work with a team of dedicated individuals working for nothing, making sure that people who come to us have a place to stay.
I believe that.
And you know, I took on the directorship of the drop-in center under tragic circumstances. I've been director there for 10 years now. Every year we've improved. You know, whether it is renovating the dorms with a cadre of volunteers, whether it's adding a new case management program. We have 9 case managers now. We're always looking at ways to improve, and I mean, that kind of gets to the,
just tell me
because
why
you
you're
could sit back, threaten our services, put in zoning regulations, and yet feel that you have the ability to denigrate the hard work of people who have dedicated their lives to helping homeless.
This is a great example of the conversation. I'm not insulting Pat or accusing him of anything. In fact, I'm saying to him that all of us
should be ashamed of the drop-in center.
All of us should be ashamed.
You said everyone should be ashamed.
Well, let me try to.
Let's take a quick listen, just a little break here. I hate to break this up, but I think there needs to be some clarification. Obviously, what Councilmember Bortz is saying that's so offensive to this side of the table. We're going to find that out. Lincoln Ware Live. We'll be right back. WKRP-TV. Back in a moment. And welcome back to Lincoln Ware Live. I'm guest host, attorney Lisa K. Crawford, in a heated discussion here with Councilmember Chris Bortz, and also Pat Clifford and Georgine Getty. I'll get this straight. We're talking about the issue of so-called proliferation of social service agencies and over the Rhine. Mr. Bortz wants to check on it. This side over here is representing the drop-in center, and the Coalition for the Homeless says, you know, everything. It may not be perfect, but the services are needed. But right before the break, you said something, Mr. Bortz, that was perceived as insultful. You said we should all be embarrassed, ashamed by the drop-in center. And
that's not what I said. I said we should be ashamed at the way we treat our homeless population in this city.
So what should we be doing?
We should be doing better, and we should be doing much, much, much better.
Well, we need a drop-in center, apparently, right?
Of course we do. We need an emergency shelter. We need more beds. In fact, we need a lot more beds at the end of the spectrum, which is the permanent supportive component. We know we need more transitional beds. We know we need more emergency beds. We know we need better case management. And I think everybody would agree the status quo is absolutely unacceptable. But in order to have this conversation, you've got to wade through insults like you hate poor people or you hate homeless people, which of course is outrageous and ridiculous. Nobody gets into city government, well, for the most part, You don't run for city council because you want to protect business interests. You run because you want to help people.
Are you concerned about a school that's being built in that area, the School for Creative and Performing Arts?
Because it's creating pressure on all of us. It's
Why?
creating an unfair amount of pressure on the drop-in center. To somehow suggest that a K-12 school cannot coexist peacefully with the drop-in center is a wild misstatement of fact. But it shows the underlying concern in the community. So we have to do better to not only educate the public about what we do.
People are concerned about this new school being so close to the drop-in.
This is a very high-profile school, the only K-12 school for creative and performing arts in the country.
But I heard Georgine just say that there's already a school in the area. No one seems to be so concerned about that. Did you say that?
Washington Park Elementary School existed for, what, 30 years, coexisted with the drop-in center right across the street, an elementary school, and nobody expressed concern, and there were never any issues.
There were a lot of concerns expressed, and the school was closed.
We have a good communication with CPS and individuals from the new school. And I believe that going forward, instead of saying different populations, you have one population needs to go at the expense of another, we need to be working together. I mean, drop-in center is in a unique situation because we're in Washington Park. And Washington Park is a site in Cincinnati where a lot of different cultures and incomes and people merge together. And so negotiating those different cultures and how they come together and how we could breed harmony instead of division, to me, is like the core example of what kind of leadership we need. Instead of saying why we can't do something, we need to be building new ways of how we can coexist.
Work together. Well, we got about 1 minute for each side, and so I'm going to split it about 30 seconds over here. Ms. Getty, what do you want to say to the viewing audience? What is your appeal at this point?
I would just say that Cincinnati is really hurting right now, and we're going to be seeing an increase in homelessness, and it's a scary winter coming up on us. And what we need to do is city leaders need to be working with social service agencies and need to be helping us attain resources so that we can take care of everyone in Cincinnati who needs it. And passing resolutions blaming social services for ruining neighborhoods is not a good step in the right direction.
Pat Clifford?
I know this has been antagonistic and heated. I would hope that after this we could really come together. My goal would be really to kind of reach across and try to build some of the bridges, make an example to the community of how we can work together instead of, with responsibility instead of blame.
All right, and the phone number for the Coalition for the Homeless real quick?
421-7803.
And for the drop-in center?
It's 721-0643.
All right, and Chris Bortz, real quick, about a little less than a minute, go ahead and make your final appeal to Cincinnati and to the greater Cincinnati area that's listening to you about this resolution. Why should they be on board with you?
Let's end it with a question. We passed a resolution at a city council that said, let's take a look at this issue and see if we can find a solution to the problem. We established committees to work on the issue that actually the city departments did. Georgine and Pat have seen and are aware of, and Georgine actually serves on those committees. So then the reaction of some folks was to say, well, now let's sue. Now, nothing is more antagonistic than litigating. So I have to ask, if we all agree that the status quo is unacceptable, we agree that for 30 years this conversation has been next to impossible.
About 10 seconds, Chris.
Isn't this our opportunity to finally work through it? And let's stop suing each other and saying that if you disagree with me, you must hate poor people. That is a ridiculous argument.
Well, it does beg the point that the two sides need to work together. We're talking about the city and we're talking about valuable social service agencies, and I don't think people dispute that. So we got to find a way for you guys to come together and work together. And so we hope that does work out. I thank you for being here today. I really appreciate your time. Thank you, Ms. Getty. Thank you, Mr. Clifford. I appreciate you all for being here. And Chris Bortz, if people want to reach you, Councilman Bortz, how do they reach you?
352-3249. Also, the city has a website, and all members of council have email addresses there. It's pretty easy to find us.
Thank you so much. We're going to take a quick break. WBQC, this is Lincoln Ware Live. We'll be right back in just a moment. Welcome back to Lincoln Ware Live. Again, I'm attorney Lisa K. Crawford, guest host. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Lincoln Ware, to sit in for you. Don't forget, today at noon, it's 38 Heroes Among Us, followed by CFL football. If you want to reach me, I'm in private practice at 651-4222. And stay tuned for the rebroadcast of this show on WOTH Channel 25 at 8 p.m. this evening. Thank you so much, WBQC.com, and you can watch also this show online, and WOTH-TV.com for programming there. Thank you very much.